This podcast is owned and operated by the RCR Association, a private third party to the Department of National Defense. The content of this podcast is the responsibility of the RCR Association and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the Government of Canada. The official emblems of the regiment are used with the permission of Regimental Headquarters, the RCR.
Welcome to the RCR Association podcast. Today we are going to be speaking with Rabbi Glogauer. We're going to talk a little bit about his career and what brought him here, and then we're also going to touch up on mental and spiritual health in the holiday season. So, Rabbi, please tell us a little bit about your life before the military.
So my life before the military is almost like a story unto itself. I was born in South Africa in 1970. It tells you already my age. I'm 54 years young, and every day being in one RCR makes me a little bit younger. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I was born in South Africa. My parents were first generation born outside of Germany. My family comes from Germany. We'll talk a little about my military experience because I'm a fifth generation military member. First one to serve in Canada and first one as a chaplain. My parents' left very late in Germany in the late 1930s. So knowing a little what was going on in Europe at that time, the majority of my family didn't get out of Germany and Poland, except for my dad's parents and my uncle and my mom's mother and grandparents. So that's how we ended up in South Africa. And I grew up. I had a nice, very interesting childhood experience growing up in South Africa. I was in the Jewish community because I'm Jewish. And then from that standpoint, it kind of set the tone for what our life was going to be. My father's experience growing up was very traumatic in South Africa. They moved around a little bit from South Africa to Zambia, and that's a whole story into my grandfather on my dad's side, trying to find work, but also his military experience in the Second World War, I think, had a deep effect on him growing up. Obviously, there was conscription in the military and my father's military experience, so my parents always said when it came time for us to grow up a little bit, my father said his children would never, ever serve in the military. So when things became very tumultuous in the late 70s in South Africa, my parents decided, okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to get out of South Africa. So that kind of laid the foundation for why we left. But just a little bit about my growing up. It was a very insular community. Even though I went to public school in South Africa, there was a small group of Jewish friends that we had in the public school system, but there was a lot of anti-Semitism in the school. There were a lot of challenges within the community, but I learned to be able to kind of make my way. I was always a tiny little kid, always really small, but I found a way to be able to kind of make my niche. Sport became a very large part of who I was and my own identity, and I thrived through sport. I was a sprinter. I was a perfect runner, even growing up really small. Sport was everything in the South African school system. It was a very huge blow in South Africa when they were no longer allowed to participate in Olympics. But somehow that like Olympic spirit or that level of sport was always very important. So the entire school year, more so in the Southern Hemisphere than in the Northern Hemisphere, but even in public school, right from very early on, sport was a main focal point. Whether it was swimming, everybody had to swim. Everybody had to run. And then it became playing cricket or rugby. So early on, I started to run and sprint, and I made the sprinting team early on. And then I competed at the high level of the university, even though I was still in primary school, which was early grades. In elementary school is the equivalent here. There was a cute little story about swimming. So everybody had to swim, and you had to learn how to swim. Obviously, being in the Southern Hemisphere where there's water around, so they have schooling And part of that education is making sure everybody learns how to swim.
Interesting.
So I hated the water, hated swimming. And it was always what I used to joke is that the way they teach them how to swim in South Africa, at least in how we were taught, is every parent would, take their young kid to a swimming pool and they just throw them in. And everybody kind of like bobbed to the top. And that was my early trauma. I can remember like being thrown into the water. So anything to do with water, I would stay away and choose every other sport. So even though I was tiny, we have like photos of me like playing cricket, and the cricket bat was like bigger than I was. Right? So cricket and sprinting, those were my two. Started to play rugby a little bit, even small. Decided just playing a little bit with our friends, a little bit at school, which was mandatory sport. So that kind of developed like my own persona that kind of helped me as we eventually left South Africa. And then came to Canada. So interesting story how my parents came to Canada. At that time, if you remember a little history, what's going on in the world at that time, Vietnam's going on. Israel had just had, 1973 Yom Kippur War and the challenges that they were going on in the Middle East. So my parents said, okay, so where are we going to go where our kids are not going to be forced to go into the military? So Israel, no, that's not going to happen. America, no, that's not going to happen. So, Canada. So my parents made an application to Canada, and you had to find a sponsor at that time. So my father left for about 3 months to try and secure, some type of living for him, and found a sponsor who would, in his field, he was a salesman. In either he could choose two sponsors, one in Toronto or one in Calgary. So not knowing too much about how winter is in Canada. So my father, okay, what's the best small town or big town? Toronto, small town Calgary. In the late 70s, we'll go to Calgary. So we ended up moving from South Africa to Calgary.
Wow, that's a big move.
Yeah, it was in many, many ways. Culturally, it was a very challenging thing for us, different accent, coming into, we came April time, so it's kind of nice, kind of springtime. So that was our first little, Calgary's not so bad, spring. So we went, right away into school, went into private school, and started just, integrating. We had no idea what was going to happen wintertime, but started integrating and, meeting some friends, become close to the community. And then big thing was like wintertime. So everybody, started playing hockey. So that was our first little exposure to wintertime sports. So of course, signed us up for hockey. And where everybody could skate, they were really like hugging boards. So that was our first little thing. Okay, like hockey became like a persona like in Canada. And right away we started, getting into hockey, and that was like a big opportunity for me to be able to transfer a little bit of that persona of how I was excelling in sport, at least in South Africa, just to become like shockingly horrible in, Canadian sport. It was like, how am I going to find my way? So I had to figure out, struggle, and try and make some connections. That was at least my growing up in the early years.
Okay, so you grow up, and is this high school? This phase?
So now, so we're still in elementary school.
Okay, so you're very young.
Right.
So then next step after that would be middle school and then high school, right? So
yes. So my parents thought, okay, so what are we going to do to be able to give them a little bit of an edge? So my parents were always in the mindset that, they're always life. I guess part of a little bit about our goal of who I am today is life's going to give you challenges. So you have the opportunity to be able to decide in there. There's a great role model for us, Viktor Frankl, A Man's Search for Meaning. Great book, title for people to be able to read. That's a story unto itself.
It's on the reading list, this break.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be. If you need a copy, I can even probably get you a copy. You don't have 400 people coming to the party for a copy, but I could get. Maybe I might be able to get a.
How many do we have to use?
Yeah, I'll get a few. I'll work on that. So the idea is that life's going to give you challenges. So how you view that determines how you come out of those challenges. And if we see them as, it is a challenge, it's going to push me to be a better part of myself, as opposed to just dwelling in, okay, well, I'm in the mud and it's terrible being in the mud and, how am I going to get out of that situation? Well, I can just dwell on my negativity, or I can say, okay, I'm in the mud right now. What am I going to do? What's my plan to be able to get out and then, use that as an experience that I can apply in different parts of my life? So that was always my parents' focus, always trying to think. Stephen Covey says it best, we need to begin with the end in mind. So my parents said, well, what's the end in mind? Neither of them had gone to university. And thought, okay, so here coming to Canada, that's going to be a great opportunity for our kids to get a better education, better themselves. That's the mindset, how we're going to get them into university. So early on in the early 80s, the late immersion French program just became a popular thing in junior high. So my parents thought, okay, so we're going to take them out of private school. Let's get them into a junior high program that has a French immersion program. So my brother was just 1 year ahead of me. We always had that sibling rivalry, a lot of competition. My brother is an incredible person unto himself. Everybody talks about a photographic memory. My brother has a perfect photo.
Wow,
which is amazing. He's used it to his advantage.
Tear down eyes at any point sometimes.
So, my photographic memory is, just knowing how to press another button on my iPhone to take photos, right? That's my photographic memory. I hope I'll remember how to do that. So from that standpoint, he was just a year ahead of me. He started in the French immersion program, excelled incredibly. So that's where I went into that program. And I went from junior high, did really well. The end of my schooling in grade 9, it took a little while for me to find my legs, but I did, and then went into Western Canada High School, which is a well-known high school in Calgary. Huge school. I ended up continuing into the French immersion program in high school. In terms of my success in high school, did really well in school. But it was more so that sport that propelled me. Continued playing high. I ran track and field and excelled very well. I was on a track team, called the Spartans. Did really well in track and field. Ended up getting a silver medal in the 400 meters in provincial championships. So that worked very well. But then in high school, started to play rugby. Started with football, started playing rugby, and I just excelled. Ended up making the city team, then the provincial team, and then that were going to national championships as well. And then met my wife in high school. So my wife was in a large part of my story. I can't basically be who I am without my other better half. It's definitely my wife. The Americans have a cute little way to say, everybody talks about, you married up. So in the military in the US, they call it out-kicking your coverage. So I definitely out-kicked my coverage by marrying my wife. So I met her last year of high school. I was involved with a Jewish youth group while I was in public school.
So I was going to ask about that. While you were an athlete, did you have, when did you decide to become a rabbi? Was that in your head while you were still an athlete?
That's a great part of it. I'm glad we got
that's transition.
Yeah, you definitely got me some time. So we'll just sit back and relax. And the rabbi's just going to tell them a whole bunch of stories, right? So from my high school experience, realizing that I was in a very secular environment, came from a very, very Jewish, very strong traditional family. I remember even we lived with my great-grandparents in South Africa before we emigrated. That's a little bit of a story when we get to the military part of my life. My great-grandfather was a very well-decorated soldier in the First World War, so we'll definitely talk about that. So after, being in that high school environment and doing all of those high school experiences, my parents felt, what are you going to do to be able to maintain your Jewish roots? So I was always involved from junior high onward in the Jewish community. Calgary had a very small Jewish community, but very culturally focused. So there were a lot of cultural events that we attended, but at the same time in our home, there were very strong traditions that we kept in our home. We always had a very strong foundation, knowing who we were, where we came from, and that would create that spiritual resilience as we're moving forward. There were a lot of, especially in junior high, a little bit in elementary school, we were engaged with other elementary schools at the same time that they were along the way. There always were a lot of anti-Semitic events that took place in my life that strengthened me to who I am. I don't look upon them as a negative experience, although at the time they were very negative, but they helped form me for who I believe I am today. So after being in that Jewish youth group, there was a convention in Vancouver. My wife was at that convention as well. We ended up meeting. And then in high school, my last year of high school, we started to connect a little bit. She was finishing her master's at the University of Victoria. I went from from high school to University of Calgary. That's all story how I ended up in my major. I started in, my son was in the medical stream. So my brother went into medical stream. Went to University of Toronto here. And I thought, okay, well, so we have another, the Jewish angel on my shoulder. We had one, of the family was already in medical school. So what's the other one going to do? So I felt this real pressure where, okay, it's not going to be law. Okay, so be business. I'll go into business. It's what, what every Jewish mother wants, at least, to have the doctor, at least check. So we'll have one in business. So I went to the Bachelor's of Commerce program at the University of Calgary. Hated every minute. And it took a D in accounting for me to realize that there's no way I'm going forward. But at the same time, because I had a very strong French background, I ended up at the same time taking a lot of French courses. So whenever we could take electives, I always chose electives as French or math. I really enjoyed math. I had an amazing math teacher to kind of guide me along the way. So I ended up getting my bachelor's, graduating with my bachelor's in French dramatic literature and math.
Sorry, can you repeat the
French dramatic literature and math.
Okay, wow, that's a very specific thing there.
Yeah, insane.
Yeah.
But I realized, so what I wanted to do, I wanted to be a teacher.
Yes.
So went into as a little side point. So I got married while we were in university. Can you the whole timeline? Hopefully everybody can follow.
Yes, we're following along.
Okay, so got married. So I was 20 when I got married.
Oh wow!
So my wife and I established our home. We used to joke that for our honeymoon, I went to University of Calgary because I had to finish was finishing my bachelor's, and she finished her master's before we got married, and then came to University of Calgary and started a PhD. So at the same time, I'm learning at the same time, figuring out, what I'm doing, enjoying teaching the public school system. My wife finished her doctorate, but had to do her internship. So it's time for our internship, and we decided, what are we going to do? So all the internship opportunities closed in Calgary. So my wife is American and said, okay, what we'll do, one of our choices, she was offered an internship in Houston, Texas. So we moved down to Houston, Texas with our 2-year-old daughter at the time for my wife to finish that internship. And I then got a teaching position, got my green card, got my teaching position in a Jewish private school in Houston, Texas. We loved Houston so much, we were there exactly 1 year and 1 week. So as soon as we could get out of Houston, we got out of Houston. And we decided, my wife finished her doctorate, finished her PhD. So now would be kind of time for me to shift and start my studies. So I figured, well, what am I going to do? I've had 2 main teaching experiences in the Jewish school in Houston, public school in Calgary. I felt that I needed to finish my rabbinical studies so I could actually become a rabbi that eventually would allow me to become a principal of the Jewish school. So I figured, that was my main focus, what I was going to do with all of my education, all of my studies. So we moved to Brooklyn, New York, where it took me 3 years to finish my rabbinical studies to become a rabbi. So at that same time, our son was born in New York. And the time was to figure out, okay, so what are we going to do? Where am I going to find my first principalship as a rabbi? which private school. We applied to a whole bunch of different schools, and we had two options on the table, one in Las Vegas and one back in Calgary. My parents at the time were living in Calgary. My brother was living in Boston at the time, and my sister living in New York. So what we were going to do, juggled a lot of, it was a hard decision what we're going to do. And yeah, in the end, we decided to actually move back to Calgary, where I would be the principal of a Jewish school in the community. I knew Calgary. My parents were there, knew the ins and outs of the,
Was your home when you came to Canada, right?
Yeah. So I figured, it's good to go back. Side little point. So in the meantime, I finished my studies in June. And then I thought, okay, so what am I going to do between June and then sign my contract? So I had July, August, September. So I had about 6 months of, no income. What are we going to do? So my wife's cousin worked Morgan Stanley Dean Witter in the World Trade Center. So for 6 months, for 6 weeks, I worked for my wife's cousin in the World Trade Center. 71st floor, World Trade Center for 6 weeks. It's pretty amazing. Gave me a great experience. You'll see, I'm going to come back to that in a moment. So park that one on the side. So we went back to Calgary. That was my first principalship. And while we're teaching, a year later, 9/11 happens. So I brought all the kids out to be able to, the junior high kids, to be able to see what was going on at a defining moment.
Right.
Seeing the World Trade Center building fall,
Well, no, I was 3 years old.
You were 3? Yeah. So, yeah, it was defining. And there, where's my cousin?
Right. Right.
Yeah. And it was traumatic. Yeah, it was traumatic for us. For me, having spent just 6 weeks, it was very, you can imagine how emotional it was. And we kept calling, couldn't get a hold of him, called his wife at the time, couldn't get a hold of her. She couldn't get a hold of him either. It took 3 hours to find out where he was. It was his son's kindergarten first day breakfast. And he was on the West Side Highway driving towards his building where he saw the first plane hit the building. So, thank God he wasn't there, but it was very defining. So it had a huge impact on us as well. But from there, long story short, we ended up being in Calgary only about 3 years. And then I had an amazing opportunity to create almost a school from scratch in Long Island. Also, we moved to Long Island. We were there for 6 years. I'm jumping ahead real quick. We were there for 6 years. And at that time, then I began my master's, finished my master's while I was the principal of the school. We built a school with a very, very well focused and focused fundraiser. He was the rabbi of the overall community. I worked under him, and the school went from grades preschool all the way to grade 8, which was the end of middle school. Got my doctorate at the same time. So finished my master's, got my doctorate in instructional technology and distance education. And then that time, after 6 years, I had the opportunity to become a principal. I was recruited to be a principal in Australia.
Oh, okay. Wow, you've been all around the world.
Yeah, so we moved to Australia. We were there in Australia for 10 years. A lot of amazing things happened. I learned a lot. I was principal of a school of about 500 kids, preschool all the way to grade 12, boys and girls school. Great experience. But from there, I felt, things kind of came to an end. A lot of things happened with the community, with the school, and it was just, which we believe is like divine providence. I finished my contract. I finished, realized, well, what's next? So that's when I thought, well, it was the Anzac. It was the 100th anniversary of World War I with the Anzacs. We had an amazing presentation, and then I met a Jewish chaplain, of the Australian Air Force. And I said, well, what are you doing? He said, yeah, no, here's the opportunity. Chaplain told me all about what he was doing in the Air Force, and I thought, you know what? maybe that's my next step. So I contacted the recruiting cell for chaplaincy here in Canada, in CAF, even though I was in Australia, and they said, we sure are looking for chaplains. So I said, sounds great, you guy. So I applied, and they said, yeah, here's your interview date. Here's when you're going to write the CFAT. Come on down, 22nd of December, 2016. I arrived in Toronto on the 20th of December, 2016.
And how did your family feel about this? Like you said, your parents moved to Canada, so there would be no military service.
Yeah.
So how did your parents, what did your wife have to say about all this?
Yeah, great interviewer, because I could tell you're following, because that was huge for me. So we arrived. I didn't tell my parents what I was doing. Had my interview, wrote the CFAT test. I think things went well. And then I remember I've only been in Toronto now. I haven't been back in Canada for 10 years. Seeing my parents. We'd seen my parents once or twice during that time. So we sat my parents down. I said to my dad, Dad, good news and bad news. Depends on how you want to take it, right? So the good news is that I'm here in Canada, and hopefully I think I'm going to be here for a long time. I'm not looking to move very much, but how would you feel about me joining the Canadian Armed Forces? And I was really worried. I 40, how old was I? 46, I think. I said, no, Dad. And my dad was very emotional. It became a very emotional thing for my father. As traumatic as my father's military experience was, Canada was like the homeland that took in our family. A lot of trauma living in South Africa, a lot of trauma in my dad's life, moving around to some very crazy places. But felt that Canada took our family in. So this is where we ended up. So when I told my father, since he was able to give blood, religiously every 4 months or however he was able to, got an amazing plaque in War Peru, achieving like an incredible amount of donations. And that was his way of saying, if there's something that I could anonymously give back to the country, this is what his contribution was. So he said, this is your contribution, right? This is what you giving back to our country. You giving that. Yeah. So he said, I gave blood. You'll wear the flag, closest to your heart. So my dad was very welcoming. For me, it was like a huge sigh of relief. I thought, okay, 46-year-old asking permission and afraid to be able to ask permission from my father, but it was good to go. And so I know we've like kind of covered like a whole bunch of my life story. I'll just tell you one little thing. Yes. So there were a lot of traumatic, it could be traumatic, events that took place in those first 30 years, maybe not. So I ended up writing a book.
Okay.
So not that I'm looking to plug my own. That's I'm coming on the podcast to be able to plug my book. It's called Never Give Up: The Journey from Class Crown to School Principals. So
and when is volume 2? Because now you can add soldier. Here's a whole lot of stuff you can write now.
You never know. I have to like check out that confidentiality that people sign waivers.
Yeah.
So here I am.
Yes. Here you are. So you sign up. You talk to your dad about it.
Yeah.
Now you're in BMQ. How was that experience?
Yeah. So amazing. The biggest challenge. So what's the biggest challenge in your career? The biggest challenge was waiting from signing up to waiting to get the call that you're good to go to that, swearing in ceremony.
Okay.
So that was like pretty huge because the wait, so it took 11 months.
Okay.
So yeah, we can talk, talk about recruitment. We want to push recruitment. It took 11 months, and that was like very challenging for my family. But besides that, my swearing in ceremony was extremely emotional for my family. My father was there, my mom was there, our kids were there, and that was huge. So from there, I'm swearing in. I'm ready to go. That was the 29th of November, 2017. And then they said, okay, well, we can wait and send you to be MQ, or what do you want to do? BMQ. So I said, no, I want to go. I'm ready to go. When's my day? What base am I going to? They said, okay, well, chaplaincy called and said, we we have good news and good news and bad news. You get three choices of, first you have to rank which element. So I thought, okay, which element? Well, Air Force, right? So
is that because the previous rabbi was the?
So I had an uncle who flew in the Air Force and IDF. That was very close to our family, and I just felt that there was some connection that I had with the Air Force. So I said Air Force, Army, and then Navy. No chance. I said, could you imagine me on a ship? It's another story I couldn't get to, right? So I said I could never see me and myself in the. I understand why in the Canadian Armed Forces they've never ever had a rabbi serve, right? Senior service. They've never had a Canadian rabbi serve in the Navy, right? Yeah, we'll talk about some of those challenges. Okay. Spoiler alert, that was my deployment in the Navy. So we'll get to that. Talk about a purple trade. Yeah. So then I went. They said, okay, great. So that was my ranking, and they said, okay, so these are the three places we want also you to rank. We want you to rank was Halifax, Kingston, or Comox. Those were my three choices. Rank those. So I ranked them. I think I went Kingston because it was closer to Toronto, Comox because it was Air Force, and then Halifax. So okay, so good news and bad news. You'll swear and you'll go in Air Force. Bad news, we're not going to send you to either of those two. We're sending you to Winnipeg. So I said, okay, well, great. That our military choice is like almost like a mirage. We think we'll tempt you with the choices, but
until you have choice until it's next man up, and you gotta go.
That's right. There you go. So I said, okay, wherever. I mean, I would go wherever. I'm ready to go wherever you need, wherever you can send. So Winnipeg, when you think it is. So 2 weeks later, I'm in Winnipeg. Was a surprise, I think, to the wing chaplain and whoever was there, because they didn't even know it was coming. And the message, by the way, he's here or he's coming. So ended up being in Winnipeg. And that was my first posting. I was in Winnipeg for 3 years. We can talk about that, but then you run something about BMQ. So I had OJ. So it was a great opportunity for OJT. So on the job training.
So let me understand something. So you went to base before going?
Yeah.
So that's something for your trade, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So okay. So you'll see. I think maybe yes, maybe no, but things just happened to me in a very crazy way. Okay. Right. I think I pushed the envelope a little bit because I knew for me to wait. I didn't understand that I could once I'm in, case starting. Right. So I'm just worried about how am I going to be able to help the bills for my family because my wife. She's, working like crazy to be able to support our entire family here in Toronto on one salary. Right? Yes. And I'm not contributing anything. So other than stress in the household, because I'm around all the time, right? I'm cooking and cleaning and then helping out while my wife's, doing hard work. So while that's going on, I figured, okay, just put me in, coach. That's going to be maybe the new time of my new book, right? Just put me in. I'm ready to go. So that's how we end up. And maybe it is trade specific, but yeah, I was posted to Winnipeg. So I'm in Winnipeg all the way till I think May.
And were you part of a unit like how you are now, or?
So I was. I had like oversight in terms of a lot of supervision. But yeah, I'm seeing members. I got posted to, even though they kept really close, but we're only 4 chaplains overseeing the entire base in Winnipeg. The entire wing in Winnipeg. So 17 wing. So that gave me a great opportunity to understand how things are, make sure I understood with my kit what's going to happen, and me think I know what's going to happen with BMQ. But then, we get everything ready, and I end up, flew to Montreal, and then get dropped off at the Green Doors in Saint Jean. So I roll up in Green Doors, and obviously I'm there a little bit earlier than everybody else. So then standing there ready to be able to, stand behind the line and then get to the front desk. The sergeant's looking, and you have to read off, who you are, et cetera, et cetera. I mess it all up and get jacked up by the sergeant. He didn't know. Sometimes people have like mercy on the chaplain. There's like no mercy, right? So, I was able to still have my phone as then we're walking up to where our quarters needed to be. And I got there and I called my wife and I said, what have I done? Like, I have no idea. I feel like I was like just screamed like it was my father. It's like, just directly I felt humiliated.
Yeah,
right?
You were older and more educated than the average candidate, so it must have been a unique experience for you.
Huge, right? So my wife, in all of her comfort, said, honey, you asked for it. Right? And I was like, imagine, she would say, okay, well, that's what you wanted, so, suck it up, and this is what you want. So, she's there, supportive. Lane.
You bought the ticket and you get on the line.
There we go.
Yeah.
So that's so BMQ. So that was one of the last serials of only chaplains, doctors, nurses, and everybody together. So we did that, and that was actually only 4 weeks. Okay. So that was our BMQ. But they've changed things now. Now chaplains are integrated with everyone and have a full basic training. Oh, okay. But I was one of the last ones, but there was a challenge where one of the main high holy days ended up being the last week. So we looked to see how are we going to work that last week, and they said no, we'll give you you check all the boxes for the first 3 weeks. You have to come back and do final X in the summer. Okay. With the RMC group.
Okay.
So that for me, that was my first real demonstration. Okay, so this is really what more military is going to be like, and these are some of the challenges that some of the people are going to, throw a chaplain in and kind of be in the field with.
So am I understanding correctly? Because there was a religious event they had to got postponed to the summertime?
Yeah. It's just so I did 3 weeks and then 1 week. The last RMC week for their entire training for the second serial, that was the last week that I jumped in there.
That's kind of a cool thing about the Army, that level of accommodation. Yeah, I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, I think, look, they were amazing. I know we pushed the boundaries, and that was really early on where,
I wouldn't say it's your faith, but it's important.
It is. I think our military's become much more sensitized to it over even my short 7 years. There were a lot of things, how to figure out kosher food in the field, how to figure out kosher food in garrison, just in St. Jean, was something new. We were the first Orthodox chaplains, and I went to the reservist rabbi as well. We were the first two to ever go through St. Jean and make those types of requests for accommodation. So there were a whole bunch of new things. How do you do Sabbath in the field? How do you do Sabbath in garrison? Which has its own, religious needs. But for the most part, I know we train as we fight, but at the same time, for us to be able to fight, we need to understand what are those limitations and those challenges, and then we work away. Obviously, going into theater or being on the ship in the box, those things we need to understand how we can accommodate them when we need to accommodate ourselves. What are the opportunities within our own spirituality to understand when there are needs that maybe are higher than our own observance? When does our levels of observance make way for those types of opportunities? So at least one real point, at least in our faith, the saving a life takes precedent over any of our religious needs, because that is the highest need of all, to be able to save life. So, how do we work that through in the training system? So that's something we've learned through, and the military definitely has found a way to work within some of those constraints, and we've come up with new pathways, which we're learning every day.
And that's a really good thing about our Army. We're always improving. So, BMQ, your first posting was before BMQ, so then second posting was to the ship?
Right, so that's back in Winnipeg, an amazing time, incredible opportunities, amazing units. My unit was MSS with the support squadron. And from then, they say it was March 2020. So APS, and they told me, okay, so Rabbi, you're going to Halifax. That's your next posting. I had an opportunity, and I actually said, okay, I'm ready to move. Where are you going to put me? And they said, well, okay, Halifax, fantastic. But we know what was happening in 2020.
Right.
So it's March 2020, and everybody's hearing what's going on with COVID.
Yes.
Right? COVID's becoming like a huge issue. And my concern was with one of the main holidays that happens during March, April time is Passover. So I figured if I have an opportunity to be able to get to Halifax sooner, they said, with the posting season, and we'll actually take you earlier. We'll actually get you before fiscal year. So that actually will help because we had money in the budget to be able to move sooner. So I said, I'll go sooner. They said, okay, fantastic. We'll actually get you out sooner. And we heard that there's the intention they were closing the Ontario-Manitoba border because of COVID. So I said, okay, well, I'll scoot through. Let me go. So within 24 hours, my unit in MSS and 17 Wing packed up my house. Packed me up, got everything into 2 crates. They said, don't worry about the weight. Normally you could get everything in 1 crate, 1,000 pounds. They said, Padre, just get it all in. Here's 2 crates. We'll help you pack. And in 24 hours, they had me packed and I was out of there, which is amazing. I transferred my home to somebody else who was able to take it. So they said, don't even worry about the inspection because we can't inspect because of COVID. So as I crossed the border, I had the wing commander who wrote a letter for me so I could actually get safe passage all the way to Halifax.
Right, yeah.
And I did. I stopped up at home for the 8-day festival and then carried on my way into Halifax. And if you remember what was going on in 2020 in Halifax, right at that time, there was the mass shooting that took place. So I'm driving and I'm listening to the news while the mass shooting is going on in Nova Scotia. It was an insane, crazy time. But then I arrived in Halifax. I had to do a 2-week quarantine.
Yes, I remember those.
Yeah, and just in the beginning of my quarantine, I got a change in posting message that we need to actually move you, instead of going into Halifax in the fleet, we're actually going to move you to 12 Wing. So what had happened? Stalker 2-2 went down. So that was the helicopter crash.
Okay, yes.
That happened in the Mediterranean. So they said, okay, well, we want a Air Force chaplain. So I was the only Air Force chaplain there. And the chaplain who was actually in 12 Wing, incredible chaplain. They said, okay, he's actually going to go sail on the Toronto. We'll have him go and sail on the Toronto in the fleet. You'll actually go and take over here 12 Wing. And that's what happened. So right during Stalker 2-2, to be there supporting incredible chaplain team, an incredible leader. The chaplain, Commander Goss, who was in charge of all the chaplains there, was incredibly sorting these through for us to be able to support families. It was an incredible wing commander, who's now a General Hawthorne, an incredible chief, Poirier, who was the wing chief, took care of all of the members, took care of the families at an incredible time. So to have that type of support and within the wing during COVID was amazing. So from there, I was the wing chaplain at that. I was the wing chaplain at that time, and we had Captain Casey, the public affairs officer, who passed away in a snowbird accident. So ended up taking care of that, and that was one of the first times of me walking in front of in the home ceremony when she returned her remains to be able to her final resting place. I was very involved with that. So those were 2 very impactful things in my career. And then I'm told, okay, great that you've done what you needed to do. We're now going to push you into the fleet. So that was a huge push for me. And for me, realizing that, being on a ship was something that I thought, okay, I have no problem being on the ship. But my first opportunity was going on Kingston, which is NCDB. So maritime and coastal defense vessel.
Okay.
Checking my my acronym. So I sailed a little bit with Kingston to kind of like feel what was going on. It was pretty great. But then the question came up with there was the Winnipeg, HMCS Winnipeg out of Esquimalt didn't have a chaplain to be able to sail, and they were setting sail in August.
Okay. So is it mandatory they need a chaplain to sail?
So normally, with all of the challenges that happen on our ships, most captains I think realize now that the benefits of having a chaplain on board, helping to, we can talk about what is the role on, in any environment. Yes. It's no different to a ship, only it's a little bit more confined. But it's a great resource to have there, I believe. It's a great resource to have a chaplain on ships. So they said, okay, until you're ready to sail. I did the NETP, which the Naval Environmental Training Program, which itself is one of the coolest courses I think I've ever been on, where we learn how to be able to fight fires and flooding. So incredible training opportunities. So I went through that, and then there was my call. So I ended up going to Esquimalt for 2 weeks to be able to, again, the whole idea, because it's during that COVID time.
The quarantine.
Yeah, so we're just coming out of it. I think it was 2023. Yeah, a little bit post-COVID. But we were still a little bit in that COVID mode, at least in the military. Still making sure that we had all of those, our COVID shots and COVID testing that was going on. And that was my deployment of projection and neon under the South China Sea. So that was definitely an amazing opportunity.
So before we talk about how you ended up here at One RCA, is there like one memorable experience from tour that you'd like to share with us from your deployment?
Yeah, so they ended up making a 3-minute movie or video that you can check it out. I think it's called Faith at Sea. Was one of the most impactful things that happened to the military. So as chaplains, we're there to be able to support all of our members. And it's not necessarily about their religious or spirituality. It's supporting them, the comfort, irrespective of their beliefs, and ensuring that whatever their needs are and their family needs are, because there's that aspect. We minister to our own, facilitate the worship of others, and care for all. So the care for all it's irrespective of just that member, knowing that they have a family. If family is in a good place, then they're in a good place too. So one of the first things coming on ship, trying to meet them, the important people who are going to help me in there, meeting the POs, and especially in the galley. And that was a huge thing for me in the galley. How am I going to keep kosher for 4 or 5 months on ship? So they brought in kosher frozen meals for me, and they put them in the freezer. And, they were, not that it's necessary from a Jewish standpoint, because it's all frozen and have to be separated, but they almost built the structure in the freezer, the kosher meal. I said that I think most sacrifice people make on the ship are all the pigs, because there's more bacon and pork loin that they serve on the ship than anything. It's quite an amazing thing. But walking into the freezer to see, how they'd taken care of me was amazing. So getting to know, the galley was really important. And as we're making our way up the coast, so Koshoff, we're making our way up the coast. It's a little story. So, we talk about sea states in terms of how crazy the weather is out at sea. And as we're just moving up the coast, because we're going up the coast to the Aleutian Islands, to Alaska, I just thought, oh my gosh, how am I get first 24 hours on ship? I thought I've made, I called my wife, while we still had Wi-Fi from the mainland. And I said to my wife, I think I've made the worst decision of my life. There's no way I'm going to be able to survive. She said, what's wrong? I said, we're at sea state 0, and I can barely even handle it. So there were a couple of tricks of the trade, and then I took some medication. My father became my best friend.
Do you get lab sick, sir?
Sorry?
Do you get lab sick at all?
Well, I'll let you know. I mean, I think it was pretty good. I didn't have such a bad ride the last one of the times I was out there, but it was just the waves were quite I took Botamine, and I said every 12 hours I took a pill so after 24 hours for it to kind of kick in, and that was really good. So I got to meet what the PO in the kitchen, and it was the middle of the night. I think the second night we're on ship, I got a knock on my door, and it was the XO and the coxswain. Rabbi, we got a problem. We need you. Sure, get dressed and come out of my cabin. That the PO's mom, who she was she was diagnosed with cancer, has gone into a coma, and we've given her 3-4 hours left. We need you to go and tell the PO this. So, so we got together, and I said, okay, so while we're doing that, what's our plan? And we said, okay, so my cabin mate was the commander of the helicopter detachment. So we said, okay, let's figure out a plan. What are our options? So the Mago, everybody got together. We figured, okay, so we could actually fly him off the ship to Nanaimo to Victoria to Vancouver to Edmonton to Halifax, if we could get him off right away. So first I ran it by the captain. The captain said, without a doubt, let's see if we can do it. So when we spoke to the PO, we said, okay, look, you ever check it? Let's speak to your sister. Let's work things out. By the way, I do have consent to tell the story, so it's all good.
Okay, that's awesome, because I want to keep it in.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Sweet, we're good to go.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, I hope standards that we keep this in.
Yeah,
It's a good.
Okay. We got consent to be able to make a little movie out of it. And long story short, we got him home. We spent the last 2 hours, I think, with his mom, but we spent some quality time with his mom. Unfortunately, incredible relationship with him. And that was, probably one of the most impactful stories of my young career at that time that I'd had. And what was even more amazing is, so now we're one person down, and they told us, well, we're not getting anybody else to be able to fill the position. So they're one person down in the galley. So I said, no worries. I'll serve every single meal.
Okay.
I'll fill in. It's my easiest way. We have a crew of 254. I will see 175 3 times a day. So that's what I did. They didn't have to free up somebody else to serve on the steam line. So I served every single meal, with the exception of the Day of Atonement. So that was 24 hours where I didn't actually go into the galley. But other than that, served every meal. And then last month, the PO actually came back, which was a little reunion. Got to spend some really quality times, because it was pretty hard to not have some in the galley. So that was my most memorable story from tour, something that had a huge impact on my chaplaincy.
Okay, so let's fast forward. You're off tour now.
Yes.
How did you end up at 1RCR?
Really great question. So from Halifax, I had the opportunity to be able to go to Div HQ in Toronto for 2 years. Yeah, Denison for 2 years as a staff officer to the Div chap, which was amazing. I learned a lot. I got to meet some, again, incredible people. Got to see the big picture of what's going in our army, especially for Div as we're about to deploy, understanding the Constitution, understanding, the positioning for us to be where we're going to be. And just serving that environment. So I'm there for 2 years, and that had an opportunity to be able to then reconnect with my family. It's like, I think, compassion on the chaplaincy to see that while I'm in the military, we made the rule with my family that my family would stay in Toronto. So my son, daughter were living at the time. My other daughter's married. We have 2 grandsons living in Cleveland, Ohio. It's a 4.5 drive from Toronto. It's pretty amazing. So at that time, when my son and daughter were living at home, it just gave me a time to be able to reconnect. So the chaplaincy brought me to Toronto in the staff officer job position. And then I figured, okay, so what's next for me in my career, right? Obviously, my goal is to progress in our rank, but more so is more about experiences. So I came in a little bit later in life, and so it wasn't so much about climbing the climbing the chain, or I'm not going to get a full pension either. But I came in for the experiences and the opportunity to be able to affect positive change in our military culture, understanding how the military is changing a little bit. But also there's a legacy and a history of Jewish members in our Canadian Armed Forces. A lot of people don't know that in the Second World War, before the idea of conscription, the Jewish community was the highest percentage per capita of any group. 77,000, so over 20% of the Jewish community enrolled in the military in the Second World War, which was 177,000. So that was a huge amount of members. Well, I can double check the numbers again, but close to 20% of the Jewish population. That was really big at that time. There were at least six Jewish chaplains, decorated chaplains as well. The first Allied Jewish service that took place in Germany was a Canadian chaplain, Rabbi Samuel Cass, which was a huge event that took place in 1945. So a Canadian chaplain led our allies in that ceremony, so in that service. So for me, coming in, this was my opportunity to be able to have some of those experiences and uphold their legacy. So I figured, for me to be able to, what's the greatest experiences? So I've been in the Air Force, I've tasted the Air Force, yes. Definitely tasted the Navy. Yes. What's next for me? Frontline unit that's going to deploy. What has better history? I believe there's no other place in Canadian military history in the Army than to be in the Royals, to be in the Royal Regiment. So I made a request to come to 1RC. Yeah, I made the request.
A lot of people request to come here, out of the sport trades.
Yes, I said I'm 1RCR. I had the ability to see that 1RCR was going to be deploying. I had some incredible support from the division chaplains, both the previous division chaplain as well as the current division chaplain, and with their support of the chaplaincy, here I am.
I say I'm a little biased, but I think 1RCR was the best choice you made. So.
Yeah, okay, very good. Well, you know what? I'm sitting here now. I've been here since July, and it has been within the blink of an eye. Incredible experience that has not disappointed both my expectations as well as my hopes.
So what has been unique about working here at One compared to your previous postings? We are a frontline unit, so it's different.
Right. So everybody always said that if you came into the difference between the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army when it comes to chaplaincy is that if you demonstrate the care and the love for your members and the willing to have a little bit of self-sacrifice for your members as a chaplain in the Army will care for you like no other chaplain's been cared for before. And I feel that. I feel the deep sentiment. People ask me, okay, so what do we call you? Is it Rabbi, Captain, Chaplain, Padre? Everybody's just a Padre. So for me, I tell them, just call me. I've always said it doesn't matter as long as you call me. But there's a great feeling when I'm walking down the hallways and someone says, "Oh, hi, Padre," or people call me Padre. I have no problem if they don't call me Rabbi and refer to that Padre term because I feel it's a term of endearment. Yes. And knowing where all the different places that 1RCR has been and the history of 1RCR to be part of that Padre legacy, for me is one of the highest accolades.
Awesome. So we're back for our second part of the interview. And in this part, Padre, we're going to be talking about spiritual health and the holidays because right now we're about to go on leave. So first, we're just going to talk about real quick what the purpose of having a rabbi, a padre, a chaplain in battalion is.
Right. So the role of a chaplain is to foster that spiritual and pastoral care of our members. And that means, those are some, it's a complicated way just to be able to say that, that ability to be able to demonstrate care, ensuring that their, resiliency is where it should be for them to be able to accomplish the tasks that they need to set out for. It's a very clear, we talk about keeping them in the fight. for me, that's a part of my role, but it's demonstrating a little bit of that compassionate side to ensure that they're well taken care of, their family's well taken care of. Simon Sinek says something amazing, and that's a little bit of who I am and what I believe in. He says, if you know your why, you know your way. And sometimes our members get lost a little bit when that why isn't very clear. The why can be somebody who, their whole focus is their dog. It could be, their family at home. Maybe it could be just, their parents, their grandparents, or maybe their why is just to be able to wear the flag closest to their hearts. For me, it's ensuring that they have all of their needs packed away so they can accomplish what they set their tasks out to. And, a lot of things, life happens. When things are really good, most of the time, they don't really need the chaplain around. When things go a little bit south, or they need a little bit of that boost to know that, we can keep them in the fight, that's my job.
So when things do go a little bit south, what are some of the services or some of the tools that you can provide to members?
Right. So the first one is to, again, accentuate that why. I need to understand them a little bit. Anybody can offer a tool sheet, that has phone numbers for them to be able to call. Every chaplain does things a little bit different. So I think I need to recognize that. We all have different personalities. We all have different strengths. I'd like to think that my strength is to be a really good listener, to understand, where are you coming from? What are your challenges? What's your drive? What's missing? And then to try to help you, complete the jigsaw puzzle. Sometimes to be able to complete that jigsaw puzzle, sometimes we need to make sure that we have the outside frame first. So my job is to help, put some of those pieces together. So, I can either walk with you to complete the rest of the puzzle or give you enough strength to be able to complete that puzzle. So it is understanding what are all the resources that are available to our members. So, we know we have SIFNAP. We know we have, social counseling, social worker counseling, CDU counseling. I have all of those tools, but it's more tailor-making them to the individual to first know who you are and what your needs.
Understood. So let's talk a little bit about the importance of peer-to-peer group networks, and then we can also touch on the Sentinel program as well.
Right.
They're kind of the same thing.
Right. So, when I hear peer-to-peer, that's what the Sentinel program is. I like to think that, especially here, let's focus a little bit on one RCR, right? There is that really close connection that somebody on your right and somebody on your left, you've got your back. That's really what the Sentinel program is. It's understanding that we're working in a stressful environment. And it's sometimes in that stressful environment, things are going to happen. Unexpected things are going to happen. Sentinels are there to be able to kind of recognize those stressors and recognize when somebody, before they start, teetering off. It's trying to be proactive. See, I know who you are. I recognize that maybe things are a little bit off today. Let me pull you on the side and find out how you do it. Maybe you need a little bit of a boost. What's going on? Your car broke down and you worry you don't have enough money to be able to fix it. I know some resources. Let's get the chaplain involved. Who might have a little bit of help to be able to give you that support. Maybe you just need that cup of coffee just to be able to get you going. So the Sentinel's there to recognize those early signs. That's a critical aspect. They're not there to be able to replace the professionals, but they're there kind of be able to know what those professionals can do and kind of be that little buffer to be able to see, maybe it's a little quick fix, or maybe, let's get you to the chaplain who can help on the bigger issues.
Awesome. So we're going to finish off with one last question. Do you have a message for RCR for the New Year's?
So I thought, what is that one thing that I want to be able to tell all of our members?
Yes.
And I think it's the one RCR message, at least how I see it, is that no one goes through challenges alone. You're never alone. You always have someone who's there to be able to either, share the good times. We've had a lot of good times in the silly week. Share those good times, but then also recognize that when things are going, those challenges are popping up, you always have somebody who's around you to be able to help you. So reach out. There's people. You can always reach out to the chaplain. I'm always there. I think if you look at all the supports that are there in the Canadian Armed Forces, perhaps the chaplaincy is the only one 365 days a week, 24/7. We have a duty chaplain there who's ready to be able to take your call. So you're never alone. Reach out for that help, and know that there's always a buddy there who's going to be looking out for you.
Thank you so much for coming out, and it's a wrap, guys.
Thanks for having me.